All right, so the materials I'm going to need for this exercise. A cup with just a tiny bit of water in the bottom, not a lot. You don't need to overflow it. A paper towel and a brush. Now the brushes, doesn't really matter which type of brush you use. You could use a round, you could use a square. I like the square, especially in some instances it gives me a nice clean edge. There's other types of square brushes that you could use. This is a chisel square. The chisel square would give you obviously the ability to, create nice clean sharp edges if you have those. All right, and then pulling and so forth. But I'm just going to start here with just a regular 1/2-inch square brush when I get some color down. Now, a little bit about the Sketch and Wash pencil. You see the thickness of the graphite. Very, very thick. It's also very, very soft. What that means is as I put it down, there's more graphite than clay, so it's going to be very powdery. It's also going to be very dark. So when you add water to graphite with the Sketch and Wash pencils, whatever value you create, it's going to end up even darker when you add water. So obviously a 6 value here is going to be as dark as my pencil. Okay, see how soft that was? It broke right there. I'm going to fill this with a good amount of pressure. And you'll watch it when I get with the water how much darker even then it's going to get. Okay, so that's my 6 value. That's as dark as my pencil can be. Now if I move to the 5 value, again, just like we did with drawing exploration, we got a dark value, a 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, so we use our pencil as a value scale. So I'm going to change how I'm holding it. Again, I'm still going to have a little bit of pressure into the 5, and I can see the difference between the two. Fill this box, or fill this oval. Again, I'm doing small circles so that I don't have a linear shade. I want this thing to be smooth. Even though with the water, it's going to smooth it out and soften it, it might not get totally smoothed out unless I try to create a nice smooth transition. So a 4 value needs to be a little bit lighter than this. If it doesn't appear lighter, I might need to go back and darken this one up a little bit. Again, notice I'm using the side of the graphite on the paper. Okay. Then my 6-step value scale. One rule of thumb when you're working with Sketch and Wash. I always suggest working light to dark. All right, and cleaning your brush in between. So if you watch what happens here, if I wet the brush first, all right, make sure there's no other color in the brush because these are also been used for watercolor. All right, dab the brush around the bottom a little bit. Take some of the excess water off, maybe by just hitting it on the paper towel. Now when you start in, go nice and slow and watch what happens. You see how that water just starts to soften up? Just softens up the graphite. But you can also see some linear textural quality to it based on the fact that I did it on a textured paper. All right. So you can see just a little bit of water, nice and damp, gives me my 1 value smoothed out. Now I just clean my brush, take a little bit of the water off again, and now I go into the 2 value. Pulling the graphite around so it's mixing, right, where I have a lot of water, you can see it kind of puddles there and it's a little bit darker there in the puddle. I want to pull all of those areas. If I go outside the lines, that's okay. All right. So I'm just pulling that around. You can see it's a little bit darker than the 1 value. I still have water on the brush. I can go right into the 3 value. Look how much darker the 3 value gets as soon as I hit it with water. That's going to continue to happen all the way around with all of the colors. It just gets darker when the graphite spreads out from the water. And most of all, you'll see how dark this gets, how quickly. Right, look how much darker that is when it gets wet. So that's my darkest darks and my lightest lights, other than maybe a 0.5 value or a 0 value. So when I'm looking at my reference photo, I should be able to see all of these values somewhere in my reference photo, because that's the idea behind good, strong black and white, is that you have white, you have black, you have all the grays in between. The second section is a smooth gradation, right? We did the jumps here. When you do a smooth gradient, you're not going to put a 0 or a 1 value in over here. I am going to put the 6 value. So again, I'm holding down the flat of the pencil, is covering as much ground as it can. And I'm starting off not as heavy pressure because I'm going to overlap pressure. So let me just put the value scale in. I'm going to lessen pressure as I work my way across. All right, so I'm going to stop the 1 value right about here. Even though I'm underneath of the 2, I want you to see something. So I got to take a little bit of it and just transition it and stop it, basically leaving a 0 value here. So I want to go back and I want to look and see, do I have enough value in here with the 5? Maybe I'll put a little bit more in going the other direction, just so I have a nice, smooth, controlled value scale all the way across. This might need a little bit more blending between the 2, between the 6 and the 5, so I'll just put a little bit more in, so on and so on. Now, when I work on this one, I'm also going to go light to dark, but here's what I want you to know. If I have a 0 value and I don't want a line, you can see there's still some lines in that. If I don't want, and I'm going to use a round brush for this, nice soft watercolor brush, the bristles are nice and soft. I'm going to put some clean water right in here to be a 0 value. And I'm going to walk that water on my brush back into the graphite. See what happens as I pick this up. Now I can pull some of this graphite down towards the 1 value, and then I can continue along as I work my way into the 3, and then I can pull some of the 3 down into the 2. If I go the other way, I'm just going to be pulling dark all the way across. So this way it gives me a nice smoother transition, and it allows me to pull. See, look at that. I got into the 3 and I started pulling some of the 3 down to the 2 and then to the 1. Now, if that looks like there's too much of a jump right there, I can take some of the water off the brush and I can soften that edge a little bit. You notice what's happening here? That's because there's a lot of water on the paper. It's starting to pill up. So I want to be careful not to overbrush as I'm working my way across this value scale. So if I come right back into it, just going to keep going. And as I come across, I just get darker as I go. And I want to pull some of that color back. So if that looks like it's too much of a jump, fine. I'll just pull from here and pull some of the dark down. And you can see I'm looking up here and I'm pretty close to matching the values that I have above. Obviously, some of what's happening is a lifting technique, so I'm kind of lifting some of the graphite off, but that's okay because I'm pulling some of the graphite, get a little bit more water, I'm pulling some of the graphite down and creating that nice soft value transition. So I've got a nice smooth gradation going across.